And this is visionary work. This is about steeping ourselves in generative questions about what could be. And if you're going to do that, you're going to quickly find that you're a revolutionary. And if you start to talk about transmuting private wealth into the commons, if you want to explore something like a community housing land trust, like that is truly revolutionary work that is rooted in our times. And I like to see that real estate is merely an extension of our culture. So we need to start creating a different culture, and we need to start making change.
Kia ora, and welcome to the Homefulness Show. I'm your host, Zola Rose, located in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We believe housing can be a means for regenerative placemaking to create affordable and sustainable homes and neighborhoods developed in collaboration with the communities that live there. We'll be exploring different housing models and neighborhood designs and innovation in energy, water, waste, construction, land use, and food systems. We showcase housing policies, finance, funding, and community engagement to unlock this potential. This show aims to empower you with knowledge, resources, and networks to support you in creating great places to live. Come join us as we bring to life the more beautiful housing that we know is possible. This episode about regenerative real estate is where I interview Neal Collins of the Regenerative Real Estate podcast and also choose Latitude, which is a regenerative real estate company. I found his podcast a few years ago and have devoured each episode as soon as it's released. He showcases models and project leaders that are creating regenerative housing and neighborhood models that are making a big impact for people and the environment. I invited Neal to meet with me online to share more about what regenerative real estate means and how his company Latitude is doing real estate differently. Neal is keen to support the model to spread to other countries. I wish to start growing this concept here as well and to find collaborators who are interested in the idea of property not just as a transactional something to buy and sell, but as a means to be in service to life. I did this interview with Neal on October 2022. It is a YouTube video, which you can find also on the Common Ground YouTube channel. So in this episode, Neal shares with us about the concepts around regeneration of place and our role as agents of change for this transformative change within our housing paradigm. So I'm going to just read a little bit from the Latitude website, which is chooselatitude.com. So Latitude seeks to inspire, educate, and connect people to the possibility of living in harmony with nature. We help guide real estate buyers on a transformative journey to their next home or investment property. Our marketing services are steeped in storytelling in order to unlock value, invoke an emotion of longing, and attract the right buyer. A regenerative process unlocks potential and leverages nature's inherent principles of abundance, circularity, and beauty. The heartbeat of Latitude, our global community of real estate change agents, helps guide real estate buyers, sellers, developers, and community stakeholders to create and transform the built environment. Through our courses on regenerative real estate and signature regenerative home certification program, we help homeowners make the critical shift toward a regenerative future so they can create healthy, resilient spaces and communities. As a community, we believe in collective knowledge, charting new paths, and creating alignment in work and life. And as our community expands, so does what it means to be a real estate professional. You'll find investors, developers, lenders, designers, consultants, and earth tenders within it. We talk about how each one of us can create a relationship with our places and spaces that align with life in a way that is meaningful to us, our families, and our communities. From this interview, I loved Neal's question about the words ownership versus stewardship. In Aotearoa, we're fortunate to have the Maori worldview and tikanga, which offers us indigenous knowledge and practices, and they consider land rather to be stewarded, not owned. So we can transform our own language towards this worldview and thereby transform our systems. I've also decided to use the term site or land when referring for a place for us to live rather than the word property. For me, the first terms speak to its place in the natural and social world and inspire stewardship and relationship, while the other term, property, speaks to ownership and transaction and denotes entitlement and objectification. For me, I'm trying to shift my language to align with my values. So I do think there is a growing interest in people to want to move housing away from transactional and more to relationship, so that we can shift our narrative on housing to one that prioritizes people and environment over profit. I wanted to revisit this episode and delve a bit deeper into it now because this topic of regenerative real estate is particularly pertinent as I embark on the next stage of my own home journey. So just a quick background of my own context. I live in the top of the South Island of Aotearoa. I had a tiny home built in 2022. I really wanted my own home, so I had it built, but then I struggled to find a site to lease to put the tiny home. Eventually, I found the Riverside community outside of Motueka, not far from Nelson. It's an intentional membership-based community and income sharing. It's owned by a trust. It's been here for 83 years. I have enjoyed living here for over 2 years, and some of the highlights are that there are friendly and cooperative neighbors that share resources and activities. My site has beautiful views and is near a peaceful dam. There are weekly community lunches and seasonal celebrations, and there's an organic food club to buy my food from bulk at cost. I've decided not to apply to join the community, so that means my lease ends in April 2026, and I'll need to move my tiny home. Now, security for tiny home owners in the Tasman region, throughout Aotearoa, and also I think around the world, is precarious. There's a lot of gray areas in terms of how they're classified as a building or vehicle, but we'll save that whole story of tiny homes and all the challenges and solutions for another episode. So, going back to my own regenerative real estate home journey, I have decided to look for a site for land, and I needed some criteria by which I would assess how is that going to meet my needs, the needs that I have for self-sufficiency, for beauty, to be able to have regenerative potential. And so knowing that I have permaculture ethics and principles and regenerative outcomes in mind, I put this into ChatGPT and asked it to make me a checklist. And it really came out with a pretty good checklist that I can use to assess. And I thought I'd read a few things out from this checklist just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that I would be looking for in a site as a place to live longer term with my tiny home. So ecological attributes, is it north facing? That's for solar access. Does it have a gentle slope, avoiding erosion prone land? Is the soil fertile? Is there diverse soil life? Is there a reliable water source and legal water rights? Is there tree cover for shelter and windbreaks? Does it have protection from the extremes? Is there a toxic chemical history for the land? Is there a manageable invasive species? And is the surrounding ecosystem healthy? Under social and cultural attributes, some of the points on the list is, are there friendly and cooperative neighbors? What's its proximity to a town or village? Are there nearby permaculture projects or properties? What's the ability to host guests and volunteers? What is the transport access for myself and visitors? Is there ability to add multiple dwellings over time to create a neighborhood or eco-village? Under economic attributes, is the purchase price under $600K? What would be the ongoing costs of living on this land? What is the zoning that is allowed? What's the income potential for production on the land or services? What is the off-grid capability? Is there on-site natural building resources, or what's the water system management that could be used? Under risk mitigation, what are the flood areas, landslide potential? Is there clear title on the land? Is the zoning supportive, and is council supportive? And other considerations is that are utilities already there, or would I need to set up an off-grid? Is there staged development possible? Is there emotional connection to the land? And does it inspire creativity and purpose? Now, I thought this was a really great list, and I even found a regenerative real estate agent who's able to help me, who understands about the values that I have. She watched the video that I made with Neal a few years ago and decided that as a real estate agent, this is what she would like to do. And so when I was wanting to start my search for land, I reached out to her, and she's very excited to be able to work with me and help me to find land. And we've actually got a few sites to look at in the near future. So really excited that I've got a plan, I have criteria, and hopefully in the future, I'm going to have a secure site that is a wonderful place for me to live. It's a way that I can create a sense of belonging within the wider community, be able to give back and service by using this land, and be able to invite others where we're learning and practicing these regenerative systems together. Just to let you know, I have also set up a Patreon page. So I have this show, the Homefulness Show, as you're listening to it, that really I would like for it to be more of a community of people who believe in this movement of more regenerative ways of living. And I want to be able to bring people together. And so this Patreon page is both a way to be a member and support the show with financial contributions, like a once-off, or membership is a reoccurring. And with that membership, then I'm able to make resources available as well as events for members to be able to meet up with each other. I'd like you to consider going to the Patreon page, which is patreon.com/common_ground_Zola. And this is where I'd like to make the videos of this journey, of this new site to be looking for, finding, and developing. And it's a way for you as a member to be able to connect with others who maybe are also on a similar journey or have aspirations, and you need connections in order to make your dream happen. And there is also the Women Revolutionizing Housing Network. There will be upcoming a series of online learning and networking events held at different times to accommodate women in other parts of the world. And we're having an in-person hui, or gathering, 6 to 8 November in the top of the South Island of Aotearoa. Please sign up to the Common Ground newsletter at commonground.net.nz to be able to get all the information that I send out via the newsletter, updates on events and resources, and the Patreon page or the membership community is also going to be a place to get lots of resources that I'm producing for you. So now on to the show, where this again is a recording from an event that was held online. Towards the end, there are some questions from the audience delving deeply into this topic. So stay tuned all the way to the end. You're going to learn a lot and hopefully be really inspired.
How I like to start off is a land acknowledgement of where I am so that you can also orient yourself to where I'm zooming in from, which is on a small island near the US-Canadian border in the Pacific Northwest. Its colonial name is called Whidbey Island. It's about an hour north of Seattle, but is the ancestral lands of the Coastal Salish people. And so this is really a way that we try to first honor a framework that we like to view in the real estate industry, not of ownership, but of stewardship. And how I really like to get into this is also to acknowledge that if you were to tell me 15 years ago that I was going to be talking to a group of people about my work in real estate, I would have laughed. I got a lot of flack after leaving our graduate school, and in going into real estate, I had a stint in between there where our work, my partner Alyssa is on this call, but our work took us overseas to India and to the Maldives. And we thought that we were going down this path of the nonprofit worker, and had a really amazing experience in India. And two things that stuck with me, and I like to mention this, is that real estate was not on my radar until I had this experience in India where we were touring these properties and they were talking about how they were designing for cool breeze to come in from the tree-lined streets that would just heat would rise up the center of these properties, and it was really situated for multi-generational housing. And on the roof, it would capture rainwater and it would go into a limestone cavern underneath these properties that would naturally treat the water to make it more potable. And so that's a pretty formative experience where you realize that we're not talking about that in the United States. Sustainable design 10 years ago may have been a very fringe, what would be considered a hippie movement at the time. It's getting a little bit better, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily mainstream, but we've made great strides. And while overseas, we had the opportunity to work with a female tree growers cooperative. And this was a time that we got to really experience what it's like for marginalized people that have been disempowered from land ownership, decision making, money making, to really put a path of self-reliance forward, and to be able to earn money for their first time, to make family decisions, and to see what happens on a community-wide scale whenever you actually put marginalized people first. And so I just wanted to put that seed into this conversation of these are the conditions that we start to realize that those experiences never leave us. And a mentor of ours said, well, I said to her, it seems like we're the sum of our experiences. She says, no, Neal, we're the sum of our experiences that we process. And so what we're doing with regenerative real estate is it's real time, me processing with Alyssa, processing with Nick, and I see Jen on here as well, of how do we come together as a community to think about what does it look like to put forth a regenerative concept into the world as it relates to housing, land, place, and space. And I want to bring up our work in the Maldives, which was around community development and how it meets climate change adaptation. And the Maldives, if you're not familiar, is the small island community in South Asia that will be inundated with sea level rise. And their plan, I guess plan B, is to relocate their population of 350,000 people to the middle of Australia. That doesn't seem like the best climate change adaptation plan, but if you were to go in and you were to do green building in all of the Maldives and decarbonize their energy sector and to put on solar panels and green roofs across the entire country, it's not going to stop the sea from rising. And that is exactly where I started to realize that we can be doing really good work, what we consider to be good work. But if we don't start to look at how our own culture operates and what's going on in our own backyard and our own communities of where we came from back home, then other countries are not going to have a chance at all. And we made a very conscious decision of where's the power concentrated within our society? Because we would start with a nonprofit project. And for those of you that are in the nonprofit sector, you'll be very familiar to this phenomenon of you come up with the most amazing project and you design it and you craft it and you think through it and you itemize and budget and come up with what you think is going to be amazing, and you bring it out to the world and you need to get it funded. And by the time that you have finished your pitching, you realize to get the money, you actually have to cater towards something completely different. And it's not the same project that you had conceived. You're now catering towards what the donor is really looking for with their agenda. And you just end up frustrated. And that was a model that I was particularly not very keen on pursuing after writing countless grant after grant and conceiving of all these programs. And so we made a very conscious decision to go into the real estate industry, which, knowing full well that this is an industry that has raped the land, has marginalized people and communities, and generally spouts off a lot of platitudes, where we are at least. And a lot of our work has been informed from having to go into the belly of the beast. And I'm not going to lie, whenever we got into it, we had to learn the conventional industry through and through. And along the way, we lost our way, I think is the best way to put it. We really wanted to learn how to go out and fundraise for a project and to purchase and own a property, and what is it like to put forth rental housing. We realized that the real estate industry is a lot easier to raise money for, because you can go out to people and say, I want to borrow your money. I want to secure it against collateral that if I don't pay you back, then you can get this asset. And then whenever I'm done, I'm going to pay you back your money and then some. And that's a really revolutionary concept for a nonprofit worker. As you deepen into that, you realize that it's a debt-based society and it's fraught with a lot of complications and problems there. I'm not going to get into that because that we could be here for a couple weeks. But that was our beginning. And we thought, wow, maybe we could just go put better housing options out there. And for somebody that was making a very meager income as a nonprofit worker, I was really struck by this thought that we could create our own livelihood. And real estate does this amazing kind of allure of passive income, and there's no ceiling to your income potential. And that draws a lot of people in. And it draws a lot of people with maybe not the best intentions, but I will say it draws a lot of people in that have really good intentions too. And what gives me a lot of hope is that there are those of us on the call that are working in this industry that have very good intentions, that are really looking to change the culture. And I think that's why we're all called to be here today. So a little fast forwarding our story a little bit more is that we ended up growing a rental portfolio, which turned into we needed to manage rental housing, which means we need staff. And whenever you take on staff, your expenses grow. And so you need to go find more revenue. And you're just kind of on that rat race. And by 2019, we looked up and we realized that we had 27 people with us managing several hundred homes, really soul-sucking work. It was a complete slog. We're working with real estate agents that are trying to figure out how to put their feet on the ground. And meanwhile, we found ourselves just spouting off the same platitudes that our job is to help you find your dream home. Or we're here to help you sell your house for the most amount of money in the least amount of time. And that's it. That's about as deep as the industry will go. And what it took for me was a sincere wake-up call to realize that I hated the business that we had built. It was, somebody described this experience as the dark soul descent that they've had a couple of in their lives. And I really like that soul descent, because we hit it not only from the business side, but we hit it because 4 of our 6 very close elders in our life came down with a terminal or a debilitating lifelong cancer diagnosis. And that hit at the same time that we just had a new baby. And we started to dig into the research and realize that this is truly a pandemic where about 100 years ago, it was not that common to have cancer at the rate that we have it now. In the 70s, only about 1 in 20 people were getting cancer. And today, in 2022, 1 in 2 males are going to develop cancer. And it's marginally better for females, where it's 1 in 3. That's an alarming statistic, and it's no better for our children, where we started to realize that 54% of our children are going to develop a chronic disease that they're going to be dealing with for the rest of their lives by the time that they're 17, before they're 17. And that's also a terrible statistic whenever you've got this newborn baby and you start to ask questions of what's going on. And you realize that this is how we're designing our communities and how we're designing our homes and our schools and our workplaces and the materials that are going into it and how we're growing our food and what's happening with all the externalities that's coming from industry. And a lot of this is exactly how I've come to realize that I work in the business of land and place and homes and habitats. And there's so much of this information that I had no idea. I knew that we had an energy problem and that we needed to have more solar panels and more solar hot water heaters and more energy efficiency. All those sustainability technology related things are good. But it was fundamentally missing a lot of the linkages that we were looking at, which was, how do we do this work in community? We started to realize there's people that are talking about biodiversity and cultural diversity and doing this in community and community-oriented housing and really rewriting a narrative of isolation, or as we like to call it in America, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and the rugged individualist. And we had a choice. We could either depart the real estate industry because it has such a nefarious and not a great reputation, and we could try to figure out what we're going to do, or we could lean in and say, if there is a concentration of wealth and power in this industry, and we can actually create change and we can use existing structures, and maybe we can even reconceive of those structures to orient towards a new way of being, then let's stay in it. And let's see where this can go.
I'd like to take a brief moment to share with you about Common Ground, the consulting agency to provide professional services to enable more affordable, socially connected, resilient, and climate-adaptive housing and neighborhood development and place-based living. So Common Ground works with local government, with community housing providers, with for-purpose developers, and with groups of people wishing to lead their own housing initiatives. We provide services in housing strategy, design and facilitation of meaningful community engagement, research, policy development, training in new approaches to better housing outcomes. We also provide services in workplace culture and communication to create more cohesive and effective working teams and workplaces. You can visit our website at commonground.net.nz to learn more about our services, and please sign up for our weekly newsletter for inspirational resources, links to case studies that showcase successful initiatives and policies, and get announcements to upcoming events.
And instead of calling it sustainable real estate, what if we started to borrow some terms that really connected on a soul level? And that was the field of regeneration, which, if you haven't put on that cloak of regeneration yet, what you'll realize is that this is an inward practice that just goes deeper and deeper, that it is a fundamentally different concept than sustainability is. I really don't like, there's this meme that's been floating around that sustainability is about doing less bad and regeneration is about doing good. If that's the definition, then we fundamentally missed what sustainability is all about. We have labeled good in a very subjective way, because what is good for you may not be good for me. And that's kind of what got us into this whole predicament in the first place. And so what we have really struck upon, that it sounds like there's a lot of similarities and we're drinking from the same philosophical cup, listening to Zola, is that regeneration can be about attuning towards life-giving principles. And what's so amazing is that this shows up in all the ways in which you're showing up and coming here today, because you might be really interested in natural building, or you might be really interested in affordable housing, or maybe you have a chemical sensitivity and you realize that you can't live in any of the housing options that are in your town because they're all actually toxic. And the only choice is you can either go out and build a multi-million-dollar non-toxic house and spend years doing it and trying to educate your architect and your builder, or you can live in your car. I haven't been to your part of the world, but if you come to ours, you're also going to see we're at the last legs of this economic system where we have houseless people on the streets. We have income disparity in such a large degree that I don't think we're ever going to catch up with it. That's one that a mentor of ours named Ross Chapin, who is really a pioneer in my mind, that he started to realize we need to build smaller and we need to orient our houses inwards instead of outwards, where we're activating our cars and our concrete. And so I think that that's a great way to bring you in. Latitude, regenerative real estate, is a sales brand. And people really want to know, what is it that you do? What's your metrics? And I want to push back on that. And everybody that's like going through their own maybe corporate process of how do we attune our workflow towards regeneration or towards sustainability, you don't have to measure it in the number of solar panels you put on a roof or the number of lawns that you change over or the number of units that you're building. That, first off, the number of units is like a complete disorienting way to talk about homes and habitats. And it is a math equation to some degree of how to build affordably, but we can do it with a little bit more dignity than the way the industry wants. But what we talk about is, how do we evolve the way that we're inhabiting the planet? And for a lot of us, that's the feeling within ourselves. And that feeling is a value set. And I want everybody to be able to understand, like, these are our values and this is what can provide our compass. There's going to a lot of challenges, some of the legal structures and the challenges that are there. Like, we really need to first honor that we're living in a really complex society with large unprecedented challenges that the human brain has a really hard time to wrap itself around, much less elected officials that we've tried to get our point across to advocate that they're also not able to necessarily move off of from an area of statistics, but from an area of feeling. So that's a little bit of pro tip that I've come to find. And so where we picked this up is we started to talk about what is regenerative real estate. And the amazing thing is that we were always very place-based. And then we started to have people from across the country and the continent and even across the globe start to say, this hits me in my stomach. I love what you're talking about. This identifies a theme in my life, and I want to be able to join what you're doing. And for other real estate agents to say, I want to join what you're doing, that's just like the most nourishing thing that you can hear. But we couldn't actually do anything about that. Our business structure allowed us to work in this one particular state, and it was hard enough to figure out, like, we lived near a river that separated the state of Washington and the state of Oregon. It was a hard enough time to work between the two of them. But we kept going and we kept putting out this theme of regenerative real estate. And we realized that regenerative real estate is really the reciprocity between people and place. And we were reading books. There's a great one that comes from Australia, actually, called Call of the Reed Warbler. It's about large scale land regeneration projects, doing ecological design and permaculture and rotational grazing and keyline design. And we started to read more indigenous authors like Robin Wall Kimmerer, who talks in a book called Braiding Sweetgrass about this relationship. And we started to realize the environmental camp that we had grown up in and cut our teeth in and was working so hard to do good in the world loved to have this narrative that the earth is going to be just fine without us, that we have caused such destruction that we're going to thwart ourselves off of this planet, and that's okay. Nature is going to rebound. And that's just a very bleak narrative. I think that we've gotten that narrative wrong. And I think we have forgotten our role that humans can be and have been a keystone species in which creates life-giving habitat for the rest of life and a myriad of other species. And so if we can start to even frame that within an urban context of, are we showing up and are we taking more than we're giving? And some people are only taking, and they don't see themselves as part of the community, and they don't see themselves as giving back. And it doesn't have to be in the most profound ways. It can be as simple as an act of placemaking, of putting out colored chalk on your sidewalk so that kids that are walking by can stop to create a picture. It can be even deeper to where maybe you're not driving a car into work, but you're taking public transportation, or you're thinking more deliberately and intentionally about the actions that you're taking. And you're starting to realize rain is hitting our roofs. And once it hits our roofs, our job is to channel it as far away and as fast as possible off site. And it's now considered stormwater. Yet across the globe, we're experiencing drought and forest fires on unprecedented levels. And so I think this is really what we need to hit upon, is how do we create a more reciprocal relationship with our places? And so what we do that is our regenerative real estate work is really as guides. So how can we use the real estate industry where people need homes? We are dealing with land and habitat. I consider agriculture a part of real estate, just as if you're to do a multifamily development or a mixed use development, like it is using land and how we're culturally using land. So what we do is we seek to update this outdated system. Sometimes it doesn't look like what you would imagine a high performance home would look like. We certainly do that, but I like to liken this to how we raise children, and that if we're raising a child with our notions of what is good and bad and what we want them to become whenever they grow up, we're likely going to screw them up. But if we actually realize that we're trying to nurture the essence and the potential within a child so that they can become who their DNA has destined them to be, and we are okay with that, but we need to nurture and cultivate along the way, then we can take that same approach of how a community wants to organize, or how someone wants to be in a relationship with their home environment. And that's where I think that we need to start, especially if we're looking to create massive policy change as well, or to go work with landowners and develop pocket neighborhoods or tiny home villages or anything of the sort that I have heard. And how we're doing that is we're really taking what we call the real estate agent, and we're flipping that on its head of how do we create more change agents? And how do we do that in communities so that we can start to cross collaborate and cross-pollinate? And this is visionary work. This is about seeping ourselves in generative questions about what could be. And if you're going to do that, you're going to quickly find that you're a revolutionary. And if you start to talk about transmuting private wealth into the commons, if you want to explore something like a community housing land trust, like that is truly revolutionary work that is rooted in our times. And I like to see that real estate is merely an extension of our culture. So we need to start creating a different culture, and we need to start making change, and we need to stop taking it from a pontification and a theorization into let's get busy and let's start doing this on the ground, and let's start experimenting and what I love to call throwing spaghetti at the wall. And so the fun part right now is that within the United States, we've been doing this for about 2 years. We're represented in 15 different states with the community. I think we just passed a couple dozen change agents that are all these people that have this feeling that they need to create change, and they need to create a livelihood doing it, because we can't do this work for free, but we certainly can start to attune our business towards life, and in a way that really honors where we've come from and exposes some of the atrocities that we've done along the way. And hopefully we can start to make a difference. We're experiencing the similar symptoms over here. We're talking about climate change and about affordability and about policy. And we're in an era now where I live that we cannot design our way into affordability. We cannot cut corners and use cheap enough material or pay our workers low enough wages to create affordability. And so what that means is that land has gotten so expensive that we have to come up with a new model. And it takes the brightest real estate minds and the blending of private funds and public funds to even think about doing an affordable housing project.
My question right now is, I'm really interested to hear what was the first step in terms of how you operated your business differently. What did you do differently in terms of buying and selling?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it really starts with the kind of counsel that you give. Like if you're just going to be a real estate agent, you can start at the very surface level of like, okay, we need to find shelter, right? What are your needs? How many bedrooms and bathrooms do you need for this house? And that is probably not the best surface level way to go into this conversation. If you want to just couch it within that very singular approach to we have one family with one home, then how do we really orient our questions in a more appreciative inquiry method around what does life look like if someone is thriving? And then how do we actually deconstruct what do we need to do to create that place-based relationship with that family that's in that property? So we might be talking about healthy materials. We might be talking about resiliency and what does that look like? And how do we, instead of going out and trying to find the cheapest designer or contractor, but how do we start to work with the people in the industry that have been waiting for the transactional side to show up? They're the folks that they hold the expertise and the knowledge to go out and actually provide the counsel to the people that are seeking it. And so one of the things about our industry is that whenever a property transfers ownership, about $80,000 worth of work happens on average in our country whenever that changes over. So we really first try to orient towards who is that ecosystem of service providers that we're working with that are value aligned, that can actually give that counsel. If I am trying to counsel somebody on this is the type of materials that you're using, this is the financing structure that you need to make this progress, then we really need to start attuning towards who are those professionals that are coming in and doing things very differently. Then whenever we start talking on larger scale projects of how do we work with housing developers and with city officials, and we start to first say, hey, we know because we have data that can prove this, that there are amenities that you're not thinking about. What they're thinking about is we just want to build the smallest amount of space to try to get the most amount of income on the back end. And we can start to even give them examples from eco villages that really hits their economic brain sensors is the best way to put it, where a developer, what they really want is they want to increase their income and decrease their expenses. And largely these eco villages, what they're doing is they have waiting lists 300 people long, and they're doing it in a way that really brings together community, and no one else is really developing co-housing or eco villages. No one's really trying to figure that out. And certainly in our country, there's only about 235 community housing land trusts that is actually decommodifying the land and separating that out from the houses. So how do we start to then work with these organizations that are desperate for either financing or for land, that we happen to have this special expertise of how do you put deals together and where does the capital come from and how do you go find the property to do it? And so those are just a couple of ways that we can really start to change our vocation towards what are these really purpose-driven projects? Or hell, we have a ton of agricultural land. A lot of that agricultural land is toxic because we've been spraying pesticides and all kinds of other nasty stuff on it and just managing it poorly. But if we're having the greatest transfer of private wealth in our lifetime, because the baby boomer generation is now retiring, how do we take conventional property that is degraded and put it into the hands of the people that are looking to regenerate and revitalize and maybe do accessible housing for our agricultural workers? So these are just ways that we can pluck a single family homeowner, a developer, a multifamily landlord, or a farmer or an organization and say, you know what, we have expertise around land and money, and here's how we can help.
Anyone else have a question? Oh, yes, Gillian?
Hi, Neal. I'm the chair of the Society for Cooperative Housing in Tauranga. And like cooperative housing doesn't really exist in New Zealand. But the National Association of Housing Cooperatives in America, you've heard of them, haven't you?
Sure, yeah.
So how does that relate with the 235 that you were talking about?
And so land trusts can start to blend in cooperative housing. And so cooperative housing is going to be an ownership structure where instead of like a condominium or a homeowners association that we have here, where everybody owns their own unit within a community, a cooperative is that you are purchasing a share within a community of that structure. That has some pretty deep roots, especially within New York, where they've had a lot of cooperatives for decades now, but they're slow to catch on in different parts of our country. I think that this is one of the areas that has the most potential, as well as how do we start to really orient more professional help of maybe it's sociocracy, or maybe it's just more consulting around how do people work together to make community-based decisions. And we start to see this happen with market rate cooperatives, as well as affordable housing cooperative-led projects, and how they're coming together. We just released a podcast episode last week about someone that they've been doing passive house design, so a very energy-focused design approach to lower the energy requirements to heat and cool a building. But what he started to do was, how do we blend together this high performance design with cooperative ownership structure with a community housing land trust? And the result of that was that they were able to design a very high performance community for $10,000 down and $800 a month, which in the community that he was in is unheard of. And so as we can start to blend some of these structures together, I think there's just a lot of tremendous promise that could be really fruitful moving forward.